My siblings, please protect our hands and pray. Most High, we ask that I may speak with your voice, that we may hear with your heart. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Some seed falls on rich soil and produces a good crop. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. May Christ be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Good News according to the book of Matthew.
Glory to you, O Christ.
That day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he climbed into a boat and sat down. The whole crowd was standing on the shore. He said many things to them in parables. A farmer went out to scatter seed. As he was scattering seed, some fell on the path, and birds came and ate it. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where the soil was shallow. They sprouted up immediately because the soil wasn't deep. But when the sun came up, it scorched the plants, and they dried up because they had no roots. Other seed fell among thorny plants. The thorny plants grew and choked them. Other seed fell on good soil and bore fruit. In one case, a yield of 100 to 1. In another, a case of 60 to 1. In another case, a yield of 30 to 1. Everyone who has ears should pay attention. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So the passage goes on with the disciples and Jesus walking apart, and them saying, why do you keep telling all these confusing stories? And Jesus said, well, because some people aren't ready to hear stuff yet. And you are, so I'm going to break it down to you. And we always focus on this breaking down, what is the shallow soil and what is the deep soil and what are the thorns and what are the path. But we're geeks, we can read. Okay? I want to point back at this spendthrift, reckless sower of seed. Now, I come from rural folk. You might be able to tell here and there around the edges. And the huge financial irresponsibility of wasting seed on the path, on the soil you know you haven't amended, where you haven't cleared the thorns. Because in that case, as the farmer, that's all your responsibility, right? Well, in the case of this metaphor, it's what the soil can bring, what it can bring to the situation. And in this metaphor, we're the different kinds of soils. But I want us to actually look at that a little bit more as where we're at in our life and our walk is the different kinds of soils, because we can remove thorns and we can enrich the soil. And by the way, that requires compost to enrich the soil. Mm-hmm. You have to actually process a lot of trash to make the soil bear fruit. And trust me, that metaphor works really well to include the amount of stuff that we have to trash and repurpose in our own heads and lives to be able to bear fruit. Okay? We can amend the soil. We can wrestle with thorns. And we get poked as we process those, right? But we can do it. And we will be more nourished if we can. But that's hard work. And frankly, sometimes the thorns come out of nowhere and outside us, right? Says the trance priest. Right now, dear God. My spiritual director has these things he checks in with me about. And every time it's this, so how are you bearing up under the current onslaught against you? By focusing on very small bits at a time. And because we know that we can amend the soil, we can get better. That sets that part of it. And in this time when there are so many external thorns, I want to go back to the God who's going to sprinkle that grace and love everywhere. Who cares if some of it hits the path? Who cares? I am going to spend all my love. I'm going to spend all my radical welcome. I'm going to throw it everywhere, and I'm currently going to throw a blessing on whatever's going on with that fire truck. When we look at Isaiah, we're going to be very close to that ambulance. No, that's the last one. Okay, anyway, not that I've done too much EMS in my life. When we look at Isaiah, and this is actually first Isaiah, so it's kind of fun that Isaiah is speaking for God here, but it's also the work Isaiah himself did, that he had such a faithful follower, that we have second Isaiah sounding so close to his teacher, and third Isaiah trying to continue that lesson and doing a pretty decent job of it. And this says that God doesn't send out the rain and snow without benefiting the earth, to give it a chance to bring forth plants and bring forth food. Because the point of sowing seeds and growing plants is to nourish and to grow more plants. You save some of that seed back. Everybody has watched me look wistfully at the corn before mid-July. I can't have corn. That's part of my culture, because you don't eat your seed crop. And so we got to be aware that seed makes food, and you have to have enough growth to be able to have more seed to make more food. And I'm going to come back to that on us and our responsibilities. Got a lot of things I want you to think about today. So God's word comes from God's mouth and does not return empty. It does what God wants. It accomplishes what God intends, even when it's scattered on the path. Because it may not have grown more, but I'm going to argue that the birds felt nourished. God's plans are never simple. And it gives us a picture of this spendthrift love that's really inarguable for anybody who's ever counted seed stock. And then this psalm is so beautiful, drenching the furrows, softening them with rainfall, blessing the growth, crowning the year with goodness. Paths overflow with rich food. The desert pastures drip with. This is rich language of fullness, of plenty, of a whole land growing and healthy and so full of life it's thin. And if you've ever heard the pasture or the meadow in the morning, you know that life sings. And then we come to Romans, which is talking about suffering. And that suffering is nothing compared to the end, to the wholeness. And that creation waits breathless with anticipation to see us bear fruit. And yes, there's frustrations. And yes, there's suffering. And there's labor pains. And there's groaning with it. And with that will come the fruit. Most of you have been listening to my sadness over losing my glorious rhododendrons. That I had somebody clear property and they cleared 45, 50-year-old trees of rhodey that you just don't see anymore. And I was pretty heartbroken, am still. And yet something amazing is happening. Because those old rhodies had such extensive roots I have rhododendron starts coming up everywhere. The roots themselves are springing forth with new rhododendrons. Where I had 3 that I was complaining and whining about, and I'm still a little bit there, to be honest. But I'm watching, I don't even know how many rhododendron starts coming up from these roots because the roots were strong. I can't think of a better metaphor for this right here. Because we've got tribulations. We've got ourselves and our ways being cut down. I'm waiting to hear that I can't teach because I'm a damn trainee. There's a lot going on. And yet, our God is still recklessly scattering seed, and the ground that we've prepared with depth and with wrestling with our thorns and with wrestling with our compost can hold deep roots of grace and love and radical inclusion that will keep springing forth because God's water comes. So God's seed comes, God's sun and water come. If we can prepare the soil, we can hold on and keep this life going. So I've thrown you a lot of metaphors, and a lot of concepts here. And I want to talk about what strengthens your roots. What are you finding strength in right now to keep going while things are as rough as they are? Because we can find encouragement and strength from what strengthens each of us. So let's talk.